ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमः विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So thank you again for joining. Okay. So I'd like to congratulate those who are here, that you have been joining for the sessions every day, and you have successfully completed first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. That is 1/3 of the Bhagavad Gita. Out of 18, 6 chapters have been done. So that's wonderful. So you should all, you can actually be happy that you have actually continued in the journey so far up to the 6th chapter. And today we'll be going in the second section, the Bhagavad Gita, which is the next 6 chapters, starting with chapter 7 and chapter 8. Okay. So often the Bhagavad Gita is actually described as a sandwich. Anyone like sandwich here? Yes? No? Okay, I see some hands raised up. Yes, so sandwich. Why is it called a sandwich? Because if you consider entire Bhagavad Gita, 18 chapters, it's divided into 3 sections. First 6, middle 6, and then last 6 chapters. Now, if you see a sandwich, the main portion of the sandwich is in the middle. And hence, the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita are actually considered the most important section of the Gita, because these 6 chapters directly talk of the aspect of devotional service or Bhakti Yoga, which is actually the essence of all the different kinds of yogas. Okay, so before we start off with chapter 7, can you all post something on the chat that what you remember from chapters 5 and 6? Anyone like to chat and post anything on the chat? Anything you remember from chapter 5, chapter 6? What was the title of chapter 5, chapter 6? Contents? Any key points you remember? Astanga Yoga. Very nice. Okay. What else? Karma Yoga. Okay. Chapter 5 talked about Karma Yoga. And Bhakti Yoga is the highest type of yoga. Very nice. That is actually the conclusion of the 6th chapter. Yoginam api sarvesham. The best form of yoga is Bhakti Yoga. Anything else? Super soul. Okay. What Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga are, right? 5th chapter talking of Karma Yoga, 6th talking of Astanga Yoga, and how these two things can elevate one to Bhakti Yoga. Okay, very nice. Nice to see all the points. Okay, so now let's start off with chapter number 7. Okay. So chapter 7 to 12 is actually dealing directly with Bhakti Yoga. Okay, and let's start off. So I'll start off with one question for all of you. Okay, and this is a very important concept, and this is like one of the key points in chapter 7 of the Gita. Okay. Now, let's say you have gone to an auditorium and to see some show. Okay. And now the auditorium is all totally packed, and you are sitting in the first row of the auditorium. Right? So there's a whole show, and you have come, and then everyone is there. The auditorium is fully packed, so many people. And then imagine that person who's to perform the show comes on the stage, and then he looks at you, and then he asks you, right? can you tell me if, let's say, John Mike is in the audience? Right? Now that the person who's going to come to do the performance, he's coming and asking you directly, can you tell me if John Mike is in the audience? Now, if you don't know John Mike, then so in this scenario, the person who's sitting in the front, he was like baffled, like he's like, why is this person asking me about this person called John Mike? You know, and then again, the performer, he actually came and said, why don't you know about this? Right? He asked him, why don't you know about this? And then even that person who's sitting, he's like, and like you can consider yourself in that position. You're just like totally confused. Why is he asking me of all people? And why is he asking about this person I don't even know of? And then this person actually finally speaks up and says that even if that so-called John Mike was sitting right next to me, I could not tell you whether he's here because I don't even know who John Mike is. You understand the story? Right? So if you don't know a person and someone is asking you if that person there, how can you tell whether that person is there or not? Unless you know a person, you cannot say whether a person is there or not. Right? It's very simple logic. So similarly, this chapter 7 starts off with this aspect where Krishna actually, often people come and say, okay, can you show me God? If you show me God, then I will worship him. And this whole question is actually flawed. Why is it flawed? Because even if someone comes and tells you, here is God, here is God. Now, if you don't know who is God, then even if that person is actually showing you God, you'll be like, okay, this is not God. Because you don't know who is God. So how will you accept anything what is shown? So that question that people often ask, that show me God and then I will worship him, that question itself is wrong. So the main point here is, first of all, one has to know who God is. How does he look? What his activities are? What his associates are. You need to know about the information about God. And then if you know about God, and then if person asks you, oh, is God there? Then you can say, yes, I know God, and actually I can see God. So 7th chapter actually starts off. And now if I come to a point that how do you know who God is? You have to, first of all, hear. So we give so much emphasis on seeing, but actually Krishna is starting the 7th chapter and telling Arjun that the most important aspect is you have to hear. When you hear who God is, what is God, how does God look like, and then if you see God, then you can recognize, oh yes, this is what I heard, this is what I know God is, and now I am seeing him. Right? So the first process in actually spiritual progress, spiritual elevation, is to hear about Krishna. Okay? So even that aspect, so someone can type it in the chat, that in spiritual, I'll tell you. So the process of spiritual journey, in the process of spiritual journey, seeing begins through hearing. Seeing begins through hearing. Can someone type that in the chat? Okay, everyone got this point? The importance of hearing. First, we have to hear. Now, if you see even Arjun's example, wasn't Krishna right next to Arjun? Right on the chariot, Krishna was seated, Arjun was seated. Arjun was right next to Krishna, right? Now Arjun was next to Krishna, but still he was confused. And only after he started hearing from Krishna, then his doubts actually started going away in the heart, and then he was actually understanding. Because initial section of Bhagavad Gita, what does Arjun say? Shishya se ham shadi mam tvam prapanna. Arjun says, I do not know what is my real duty, what is my real dharma. You please tell me, O Krishna. So Krishna was right next to Arjun, but still Arjun was confused. Only when he started hearing from Krishna were his doubts actually removed. right? So hearing is actually the most important aspect in spiritual life. That is the first thing. So Krishna starts off chapter 7 by actually saying this verse, which is actually a very famous verse, where Krishna actually says, Gita, right? Maya sakta manapartha yogam yunjan madashraya asamsayam samakramam yatha gyashashi tachvim. And here Krishna is actually giving the whole process. What happens when one hears? So I need one volunteer who can type into the chat. Who would like to do it? Okay, Navneet, you want to do it? Okay. So you can type in the first word, hearing. Okay, hearing. So first we have to hear about Krishna, and then what happens? One gets to know about Krishna. Yatha gyasasi tachrunu. So you get knowledge about Krishna. So after hearing, the next one is knowledge. So from hearing comes knowledge. And then when you get knowledge, what happens? Then the doubts in our heart are cleared out. So you can type in the third point as doubts removed. Okay, so that is number 3, right? And then he says, Asamsayam Samakrama, then Yogam Yunjan Madashraya. When your doubts are removed, then one can practice yoga, taking shelter of Krishna. So next point is, then one can practice yoga. Practice yoga. And here yoga is actually referring to Bhakti Yoga. Then one can practice Bhakti Yoga. Yeah, okay. And here you can also type in Bhakti Yoga. And then Krishna says, Maya Sakta Manapartha. And then our mind is absorbed in Krishna. Right? So final point is mind absorbed in Krishna. Okay, so these 6 steps is actually the first verse of the 7th chapter, where Krishna says, you have to hear about me, and by hearing you'll get knowledge. When you get knowledge, then the doubts in your heart will be removed. And when doubts are removed, then one can practice yoga with full determination. And then our mind will be always absorbed in Krishna. We'll always be in Krishna consciousness. Okay. Okay, so that's the first theme about how hearing is so important. Right? Does anyone have any questions or comments up to this point? Okay, so now let's go. We'll proceed, and we'll go to the second section of this chapter, where Krishna will actually give knowledge about him. Okay, so now one may say, okay, Krishna, where is Krishna? And one say Krishna is in the temple, right? But Krishna is actually giving knowledge to us in the 7th chapter by saying that how everywhere in the world we can see the presence of Krishna. Okay, so first of all, he says, Bhumir apo nalo vayu kham mano buddhir evacha ahankara iti ame bhinna prakrite astada. So this is text number 4 of the 7th chapter, where Krishna says, earth, water, fire, air, ether or sky, right? Ether or sky, mind, intelligence. Krishna says all of these are my separated material energies. So Krishna is saying everything that we see around us, everything that you see around us, can it be this, classified either as earth, water, fire, air, ether, or a combination of these elements? And Krishna is saying, everywhere you can see my energies. This is all my energies. And then he says, above all these energies is who? He says, aparayam itatannam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhuta mahabaho. He says, above this is each one of us. He says, above this is the spirit soul. Right? So the spirit soul is above the material elements. And why is the spirit soul above the material elements? Because spirit soul is conscious. We are conscious, right? If I take an object in my hand, I take my cell phone, right? The cell phone has no emotions, right? If someone drops it, it's not the cell phone is going to feel hurt. If someone comes and hits me, I feel the pain because I'm conscious, right? So Krishna is saying all these material elements, they are also part of my energy, but above that is actually the living entity, because the living entity is conscious. And then he says, both these material elements and the living entity, who is the creator, who is the source of all these elements, that is actually Krishna himself. So Krishna is the source of the living entity and all these material elements. Actually, everything you see is the energy of Krishna. Okay, now one question for all of you. So have you all seen like a necklace with beads? Yeah, okay. So you can see even like, I have Tulsi beads. So there are beads, but what is holding all the beads together?
The string.
The string, right? So if the string is actually weak, if the string breaks away, then the whole necklace is split, right? All the beads will fall out, right? So what is the most important aspect in that necklace? It is a string that is holding all the beads and all the pearls together. And Krishna is using that example. And he's saying, everything in this material world you see, everything is happening so perfectly. The sun is rising every day, the sun sets every day, the seasons change, and then the rainfall occurs, water is evaporated from the surface, and then clouds are formed, and then rain actually falls. And all the planets are actually moving in a particular orbit at a particular speed, right? It says everything here that is happening. Who is actually maintaining, who is actually making sure that everything is happening perfectly? Krishna says, I am that person. And not only that, he actually says, Mata Parataram Nanyat Kinchit Asti Dhananjaya. Krishna is actually telling Arjun that I am the supreme God. I am the highest personality of Godhead. There is no one above me. I am the highest truth. Right? And he's actually giving the example, just like how strings hold all pearls together, similarly I am actually maintaining this entire material world. Okay. So in this, and then further, Krishna actually says in the 7th chapter, I can also share my screen so we can quickly go through the verses I've described. One minute. Okay, anyone has any questions up to this point? Okay, so let me share my screen. So here you see chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita, knowledge of the absolute, right? So now we already discussed this verse where Krishna talks of importance of hearing. And then he says, Bhumir apo nalo vayur kham mano buddhi revacha, earth, water, fire, air, ether. All these are my energies. And then above this is actually who? The living entity, right? And then both of these are actually, I am the source, I am the origin of both of these. And then he says, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me, just like pearls are strung on a string or a thread. Okay. Then Krishna actually makes this point. Okay, now we understand that Krishna is actually maintaining everything. Krishna is the source of everything. Now Krishna is actually further telling us how we can see Krishna's hand in everything. Right? And in text 8, he says what? Rasoham apsu konteya prabhasmi sasi surya pranava sarvedeshu sabdake porusham nishu. He says, I am the taste of water. Right? So when we actually drink water, every time if we drink water, and when we drink water and we think, oh, the taste of water is Krishna. And that way, if you remember Krishna, then we are actually seeing the presence of Krishna everywhere. And then in the 6th chapter, yesterday, what we read, what does Krishna say? If one sees me everywhere, then I am not lost to him, and he is not lost to me. So Krishna always, if you can see Krishna everywhere in this world, then Krishna will always take care of us. He will never forget us. Hmm? So Krishna says, I am the taste of water, I am the light of the sun, the moon, I am the ability in man, I am the sound in ether. And then, when there is the first rainfall, and there is a fragrance from the earth, Krishna says, I am that fragrance of that earth, right? And I am the original seed of all existence. I am the intelligence of all the intelligent, and and so on, right? So Krishna is actually saying how he is actually everywhere. We just have to be conscious of Krishna. We just have to be great, have that mood of gratitude to Krishna, that yes, everything that's happening in this material world, it is actually Krishna who is actually making everything happen. And in that way, we actually see Krishna as our best friend and always be full grateful to Krishna. Okay. So this is second section of the seventh chapter. Right? So this actually, we can also study this seventh chapter in terms of an acronym. Right? The first one, we'll do the acronym HEAD. Someone can type that in the chat. HEAD. HEAD. Okay. Now we have covered two of these. Right? What does H stand for? What was the first section? Who can say? Can you type it in the chat? Hear, yes. So H stands for hearing. Then E. E stands for everywhere. Where is Krishna present? Not only he is present in the temple, but Krishna is actually present everywhere through his energy. So E stands for everywhere. Right? So we are doing our acronym HEAD. Right? Head. Okay. So now we have done HE. Right? So now we'll actually go to A. Right? A is accept or reject. Okay, so someone can type that. A stands for accept or reject. Okay, so what is this accept or reject? Now, if you see, now someone may say, okay, if Krishna is everywhere, why cannot everyone see Krishna's presence? Why do people say, oh, there is no God, or God is dead? Actually, if you see, even our great scientists like Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, they all actually accepted the presence of God because they knew that this creation is so complicated, how everything is working is so complicated. Even inside our body, how everything digestion happens and how when you take the food inside and energy is given all through our body, everything's so complicated. And they knew for sure that yes, there is an intelligent creator behind everything. They accepted that intelligent creator as God himself. Right? So there's a story of Isaac Newton that Srila Prabhupada says that once Isaac Newton actually created a model of the entire solar system, with the sun in the center and all the different planets around the sun, right? He created the entire model. And next day, one of his friends actually came and he saw the model and he was amazed. He said, wow, this is so good. Who has created this model? And then Newton actually replied, no, it just happened by chance. The friends started laughing. By chance? How is it possible by chance? Everything's so nicely happening. Sun in the center, all planets going around. How can it be by chance? And then Newton actually made the point. Yes, there is an intelligence behind this. And similarly, there is an intelligent creator behind this entire creation. And that intelligent creator is none other than God, Krishna. Okay, and Newton, when he actually wrote his famous book called Mathematica, at the end of this, in the first section of this book, he concluded the book by saying the point that if by studying this book, if people, they actually start, their faith in God actually increases, then I feel that all the science that I have done is actually successful. Right? So for us, since we are actually studying academics, we should actually see how this academic knowledge is going to increase our faith in the presence of God. How through this academic knowledge can I see the presence of Krishna everywhere? That should be our aim of studying even all our academic knowledge. Okay? Okay. Now coming to accept and reject. So now if Krishna is everywhere, then why cannot everyone see Krishna? Right? Why do people say sometimes God is not there, God is dead? Why do people say all this? Why are atheists in this world? Then that is the third section, which is accept or reject. So Krishna in this section actually says that every one of us, we are actually covered by the three modes of material nature. Now, did you discuss this earlier in this sessions? What are the three modes of material nature? What are the three modes? Who can type it in the chat? So there is mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance, right? So three modes of material nature. Now Krishna is saying that each one of us, we are illusioned by the three modes of material nature. What does that mean? Actually, if you see our identity as spirit soul, as Atma, the Atma is actually full of knowledge. The Atma knows that we have a connection with Krishna, but that knowledge is actually covered, you know. And how is that knowledge covered? It is actually covered by these modes. So we all have experienced these modes. When you get up in the morning and the alarm rings, what mode are you in? Normally we are like, oh, so sleepy, I just want to turn off the alarm and to go back to bed. What is that mode? That is actually the mode of ignorance, because it is actually laziness. Right? The second mode is when we get active, when let's say at 9 a.m. in the morning, going to school and everything is like active, lot of activity. That is what? Mode of passion. Right? And then what is goodness? Mode of goodness is when we are actually, let's say, we are at our studies and we are just studying sincerely, completely absorbed in the studies. That is actually mode of goodness. Right? So we are actually affected by these three modes throughout the day, and these modes act in such a way that they actually cover our real knowledge of the presence of God. So though Krishna is actually everywhere, if you actually have the eyes of knowledge, you can see Krishna everywhere, but because of these modes, we actually cannot see Krishna. Right? Then Krishna makes a very important point. He says, okay, if that is the case, then can anyone rise above the modes? Can anyone directly see Krishna? Can anyone be free from all the illusion? And then Krishna says that famous verse, Devi Yesha Gunamai Mama Maya Duratyaya Mam Eva Ye Prapadyante Maya Etam Tarantite. Krishna gives a secret formula here, and he actually concludes the Bhagavad Gita with the same formula. That if we surrender to Krishna, maybe someone can write that in the chat, surrender to Krishna. Then Krishna says, I myself will take away the covering, and then we can actually see Krishna face to face. And what does it mean to surrender to Krishna? Like normally when we think of surrender, we think of like, okay, two people are fighting and then one of them is losing and then he puts a white flag and say, oh, I surrender. No, this surrender is actually, when we say surrender to Krishna, we live our life in such a way that anything we are doing, we do it in a way that is actually favorable to Krishna, that will please Krishna. And those things which are not favorable to Krishna, we actually reject those things. Then we accept Krishna, that Krishna, whatever is this material world, there'll be so many problems, ups and downs, but Krishna will maintain me, Krishna will protect me. That is surrender to Krishna. Okay? So having that firm conviction in the heart that Krishna is there for me. He is my best friend and he will protect me always. He will maintain me. He will take care of me. And all I have to do is whatever I do it in such a way that will please Krishna. And then anything which is taking me away from Krishna, I don't do all those things. That is actually surrender to Krishna. Okay. So that is accepting Krishna, right? Accepting Krishna means surrender to Krishna. That is our third acronym. H-E-A, right? Now reject. Why would people reject Krishna? Then Krishna actually talks of 4 kinds of people who do not accept Krishna and 4 kinds of people who approach Krishna but with some other motivation. So Krishna says in, let me share my screen again. So in this next section, Krishna actually tells, so we did HEA, right? So D, last acronym, which is D, and D actually stands for different destinations. So someone can write that in the chat. D stands for destinations. Okay, so there are different levels of worshipping Krishna, and everyone, based on our faith in Krishna, based on our approach to Krishna, we have different levels of worship and different destinations, right? So here if you see text number 15, Krishna says, Namam duskrino muda prapadante naradama maya partagyana asuram bhavam ashritaha, right? Who is an example of someone who was very, like, physically, he was close to Krishna, but he could not recognize Krishna's glories. How many of you know Mahabharata? So who was there in Mahabharata who saw Krishna many times, but still he could not recognize that this Krishna is Supreme God?
Duryodhana.
What do you say?
Duryodhana.
Duryodhana, very nice. Like Duryodhana, he saw Krishna, but still he could not recognize Krishna is God, right? And why was that? Because he was covered by the modes of material nature. And here, Krishna is actually saying, no, mam, duskrino mudha, those who are actually foolish, they actually do not surrender to Krishna, right? So he talks of 4 different kinds who are foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who actually are demons. They actually do not accept Krishna. So if you see the third agreement, accept or reject, these are the 4 kinds of people who reject Krishna. Okay. Now we are going to do the last D, different levels of worship. So Krishna talks, some of, okay, maybe you know the story. So some people, someone may approach Krishna with some material motive, right? Someone may approach Krishna and say, oh, Krishna, I want to earn a lot of wealth, and hence I am worshipping you. Anyone can say an example of such a person who approached Krishna for gaining material wealth? Go ahead, Navneet. Dhruv, yes. So I see in the chat. Dhruv, what do you say?
Maybe a kid who was praying to Krishna for like toys or something like that.
Navneet, your voice is very noisy. So maybe you can mute yourself. You can just post in the chat. That's easier. Okay. So one example is Dhruva. So we know the story of Dhruva, a 5-year-old boy. But why did he approach Krishna? He wanted to gain a big kingdom, right? So Krishna is actually saying different destinations for different people, right? So in that he actually says, well, there are those who actually worship Krishna with some material motive. Those who worship Krishna because of some problems. I have a problem, I go to Krishna, right? And then he says, third category, those are just like, oh, what is Krishna? Who are these devotees of Krishna? Just to know, they actually approach Krishna, right? So someone can, okay. And then the fourth category is those who want to know knowledge, want to get knowledge about Krishna. These are 4 categories of people who actually approach Krishna. Now, Krishna is actually saying that all these 4 categories, because they are coming to me, they are actually magnanimous. They are very special. So when you have a problem in your life, do you try to escape the problem or do you try to turn to Krishna? Think about this, right? Think about this. Yeah, Namnit, a man who wants to get a kingdom. So that's Dhruv. So think about this point. When we have problems in our life, do we actually come to our temple in our house or anywhere and say, oh Krishna, please help me? Or do we actually just say, oh, problem, let me try to escape the problem? So here Krishna is saying, even if you are approaching Krishna with some problems in your mind, that is also good. It may not be the best, but it is good. Because finally you're coming to Krishna, and anyone who comes to Krishna will get purified, right? So that is four kinds of people who actually come to Krishna with some material motive. Okay, and then after Krishna actually says of these four, he says the best of them is actually one who is seeking or knowledge about Krishna. Then he says, okay, so different destinations. So the last D was different destination. There Krishna actually talks about, okay, if Krishna is saying he is supreme God, what about so many other personalities? We hear about Indra, we hear about Ganesh, we hear about so many different demigods, Vayu Dev, and all these different demigods. And Krishna is actually saying, if you worship these demigods, you will actually go to the demigod. But these demigods, because they are also within the material world, you will go there and then you will come back to this earth planet. So the result of worshipping the demigods is temporary. And hence Krishna says that those who worship demigod to get some material motive, that is actually not very intelligent. Even if you have material motive, better you worship Krishna, because Krishna will purify you. Okay? So he actually talks about the problem. He says, like, those who worship demigods, they don't have the right knowledge that finally, even if you approach the demigods, it's finally Krishna who's giving the result. And hence one should just worship Krishna only. Right? So that is about demigods. And Krishna also, he here talks about impersonalists, that those who consider that Krishna finally is simply energy, there's no form to Krishna, then Krishna calls them, they are not intelligent at all. They are not intelligent at all. In that way, he talks about demigods, and he actually says that those who worship demigods, they go to demigods, but those who worship me, they will actually come to me. Right? So that is the last D, different destinations. Okay, so that is chapter 7 in a quick overview. Let's see, any comments, or anyone wants to share any point from this chapter that you like? So let's refresh our memory. What are the four HEAD? Please type it in the chat. Okay, H stands for hearing. E stands for everywhere. Hearing is a way we progress in our spiritual journey. E stands for Krishna is everywhere. We just have to see Krishna, the presence of Krishna in our life. A stands for accept or reject, and D stands for different destinations. So those we accept the different demigods, we respect them, but we know that worshipping a demigods, the result is temporary. And hence, if you worship demigods, you go to the demigods. But if you actually worship Krishna, you will actually go to Krishna. Okay, so this is chapter 7 in a quick overview. Are there any questions, any comments on this?
Prabhuji, I had one question. But in the beginning, we talked about how the modes of nature, they cover up people's perception that Krishna is God, and it makes them not see that like Krishna is God. Why do the material modes do that, Prabhu?
Also, every living entity has its own desires and free will. So Krishna has repeatedly pointed this in the Bhagavad Gita, that we all have a free will, and because of the free will, we have certain desires. So if someone has a desire of not turning to Krishna and just wants to become like, I want to enjoy separate from Krishna, and Krishna says, okay, if that's the thing, I will put you under the control of the three modes of material nature.
But they can still do that even if they know that Krishna is God, right? They can know that Krishna is God, but they still don't have to worship him.
And that means they are still under the modes. So, see, if someone is worshipping Krishna, then it depends on what is the motivation of worshipping Krishna. But Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, in the 7th chapter, that even if someone is worshipping Krishna with material motive, that is also good, because you're finally coming in contact with Krishna. You'll get purified. How Dhruv Maharaj, after his worship, then Krishna personally came in front of him, and then he was purified. I was thinking, like, why was I actually asking for such a big kingdom? It is just like broken pieces of glass. While obtaining Krishna is like the best jewel, the priceless diamond that one can actually get. Why should I aspire for material? So the example is given just like if it's a cloudy day, right? We'll consider Krishna like the sun and we are living entity. So if there is a cloudy day, then we cannot see the sun, right? But from the sun's perspective, it is still shining bright. It is, if you go above the clouds, you can still see the sun. So it is actually we who are covered by the cloud. But what creates the cloud? It is finally the sun that creates the cloud. Because as the sun does not evaporate the water, the clouds are not formed. So similarly, the Maya or this three modes of material nature are actually under Krishna's control. But we have selected to be under the cloud. But do we have an option? Yes, we have an option. We can take a flight and we can go above the clouds and still see the sun. So the process of Bhakti Yoga is just like taking a flight and going above the clouds. And that you can see Krishna face to face. You can see the presence of Krishna everywhere. You know? So that flight, that airplane that actually takes us above the clouds, that is actually Bhakti Yoga. Is that okay, Vishnu?
Thank you, Prabhu.
I see two more raised hands. Is that a question? Navneet, Radhika, and Rasika.
Yes. My question is that you said surrender to Krishna. So, when you say surrender to Krishna, that means what you do things for Krishna. But if you don't have the mood, what do you do?
If you don't have what?
The mood to
The,
surrender.
the mood of surrender? That's why we have to hear. That's the first point of 7th chapter. What does Krishna say? You have to hear about Krishna. So we can hear nice bhajans about Krishna. We can hear Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. We can hear different kirtans. And when we keep hearing about Krishna, then we will develop that mood of surrender to Krishna. So surrender to Krishna is the perfection, but it starts off by hearing about Krishna. So we have to hear more and more. We have to hear the Bhagavad Gita. Every day we have to wash, we have to bathe our consciousness with the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. Even if it is like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, we have to hear Bhagavad Gita. And reading is also like hearing. So we read Bhagavad Gita every day, and that way we bathe our consciousness. So we have to do this task of hearing or reading the Bhagavad Gita. And Navneet, you have a question?
Yes, probably. So, I just wanted to say, it's like another definition for passion, like energetic or something like that.
Yeah. So here, so normally in the current, English language or current society, we use passion as, yes, I am passionate about, something. I'm passionate about a game or something, and that's considered like a positive way. But Krishna, when the word used in our Bhagavad Gita is used passion, that is not exactly like the passion that is what we use in our regular language. That's why the right word is actually we have to go to the Sanskrit, where it talks of Rajo Guna. Rajo. Rajo means that at that moment we are filled with so many desires. Desire, like I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to earn this, I want to get this prize, I want to get. If like our mind is full of so many desires, that is the mode of passion. Okay, it is different. It's slightly different from how we define passion in this.
And Prabhuji, so when I was reading Bhagavad Gita, it said that like Kshatriyas mostly use the mood for passion.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Because Kshatriyas, they have to fight, right? So in that mood of fighting, they have that mood of passion. So they have the mood of passion. They're like, okay, let's go, let's do it.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
Good questions, good points. Okay, so 7th chapter, everyone has an overview of the 7th chapter now. So remember the acronym HEAT. Okay, okay. Now we go to chapter number 8 of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, chapter number 8 starts off with Arjun actually asking many questions to Krishna. Right? He actually asks questions about different terms like what is Brahma, what is Adhyatma, what is Karma, what is Adi Bhuta. He asks many questions. And it actually starts off with Krishna giving the answer to all these questions. And then the last question that Arjun asks is actually, how can one know Krishna at the time of death? And the entire 8th chapter actually focuses on this last question of Arjuna. How can you know Krishna at the time of death? Now, if you see in this material world, people don't like to talk about death. And they just like hide it nicely in a closed box and say like, oh, it is not good to talk about that. And the reason is because they do not know what happens after that. Now, Krishna is changing the whole conception of each one of us. And he's actually saying that how about we consider that as a final exam and the entire life as a preparation for the final exam. Can we do that? That is the whole 8th chapter. So, few of you said you know the story of Mahabharata. So in Mahabharata, there is a story of once when the 5 Pandavas, they were in the forest and they were actually became thirsty. They wanted to go and get some water to drink. So first the youngest Pandava, Nakul, Sahadev, they actually, one of them went to the close by lake and they actually wanted to get water to drink and bring for the others. But as soon as they were going to get water, then a yaksha, like kind of a bird, he actually came and said, no, you cannot take the water from this lake. First, you have to answer my questions. And then Nakul said that, who are you? You're just an ordinary bird. Don't you know I'm the great Pandava? I'm the Pandavas. And he just drank. And as soon as he drank, one way he just fell down to the ground unconscious. And one by one, all the Pandavas came and they drank the water and they became unconscious. And finally, last, who came? Yudhishthir came. And even when Yudhishthir came, then same Yaksha told him, first you have to answer my questions. And then Yudhishthir said, okay, let me answer your questions. And then what was the question that Yaksha asked? What is the most amazing thing in this world? And what did Yudhishthir Maharaj say? He said, the most amazing thing in this world is that people see that there is actually death happening everywhere, but they think that this is not going to happen to me. So normally people think that, oh, why should we talk about that? It's very, very uncomfortable. Yeah, it is. It may be an uncomfortable reality. Nobody wants it, but everyone will have to face it at one point or another. So why not we prepare for that as it is our final exam? Right? So that is the theme of the 8th chapter. Now, how can we see that as a final exam and live our life as a preparation for that? Okay. Now, what do you mean by living our life as a preparation of that? Now, okay, here's a question. Who dies? Does the material body die or the soul die? Can you type in the
Material body.
Okay, material body dies. We already read in 2nd chapter that the soul never dies, right? Only the material body dies. So when we talk of death, who is dying? It is a material body who is dying. So if we actually live our life in such a way that if we are always conscious of who we really are, we are at the platform of the spirit soul, then there is no question of death because spirit soul is eternal. So can we live our life where we can always be conscious of who we really are? And that is the preparation for the final exam. Okay, so someone can type that in the chat. Preparation for the final exam is to live our life in such a way that we are always conscious of who we really are. And that's a little big, but you can reframe and put that sentence. Right? So to actually come to the platform of who we really are, we have to fight some enemies that are actually stopping us from understanding who we are. Can anyone guess what those enemies are? That actually stops us to understand who we are. Navneet, you can type it in the chat. Lust, yes, lust. Okay, what else? Anger, ignorance, greed, enviousness, illusion, right? All these things, pride, yes, very nice, very nice. So all these are our enemies that actually stops us from understanding who we really are. So our entire life's journey is a way when we can actually get rid of all these enemies or defeat all these enemies. And then if we live our life in such a way that we are always conscious of who we are, we live a life in a very spiritual way, then there is no question of that. Because that is for the material body, the spirit soul never dies. Right? Okay. So that is the theme. And then Krishna actually in text number 5, let me share my screen. Let me show you. So let's see chapter number 8. Okay, so this is 7th chapter, and we move on to chapter number 8 of the Bhagavad Gita. So chapter 8 is titled Attaining the Supreme. Right. So first verse is Arjun asking so many questions. What is Brahman? What is the self? What are demigods? All these. Right? And then the last question, how can those you're saying, how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? Right? And then what does Krishna say? He says, Ante kale cha mam viva smaran muktva kalevaram ya prayati samadbhavam yati nasti atra samshayaha. He says, anyone who actually gives up this material body and while he is giving up, he actually thinks about Krishna, that person will go back to Krishna. So if we live our life in such a way that if we can always think about Krishna, then when we leave our material body, we will go back to Krishna. And then Krishna tells a general principle. He says, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam, tyajate ante kalevaram. Actually, whatever you think at the time of death, that is will be your next destination. So it is said that at the time of death, what happens is all whatever we have done in our life, that everything flashes in our mind very rapidly, like a movie. You see your entire life go in front of you. So whatever we have done in our entire life, that's what will be the main focus at the time of death. So if throughout our entire life, if we actually practice thinking about Krishna, then when we leave our body, we will go back to Krishna. So can we see our life as a preparation for the final exam? Right? So someone can put that in the chat. Life as preparation for the final exam. Now, how do we do this? So Krishna then says this very important verse. He says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhyacha. Right? So Krishna is actually saying that yes, so while you're doing your fighting, you actually think about me. So what is the instruction for each one of us? While we are studying, while we are giving our exams, while we are doing whatever we are doing, we actually try to think about Krishna. And how we think about Krishna in this age of Kali Yuga? By chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. We chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So if we can live our entire life focusing on this Mahamantra, then and at the same time we do our duties of studies, we do our duties of other whatever our duties are to our parents, to our friends, to our cousin, to our brother, whatever is our duty. While we are doing our duty, if we can always keep the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, always chant the Maha Mantra, then Krishna says, then Maya Arpita Manobuddhi Mam Evasya Samsaya. Without any doubt, when your final exam is there, you will attain success. You will go back to Krishna. Okay. So this is the first section of this chapter. We can do this chapter as with the acronym. Okay, let's do this because we're talking of death. We'll do this chapter as acronym DEAD, dead. Okay, so D stands for doubts. Okay, so the 8th chapter starts off with what? Arjun asking so many doubts. So when you're hearing any spiritual topic, then you should think in your mind, okay, what is the knowledge being given to me? How is Arjun receiving this knowledge? How is it practical for me? Do I have any questions of how to implement this knowledge, or do I have any questions of how to apply this knowledge? Right? Or do I have any questions about the knowledge itself? So we should always, when we are hearing spiritual knowledge, have an active mind where there are questions always going around your mind to try to understand. So first thing is doubts. Second thing is E, right? DEAD, right? E stands for end of life. Right? So you want to see our entire life as a preparation for the end of life. Right? So we talked about end of life. What is the principle there? Whatever you think of at the time of death, that is what you're going to get in your next life. And if you think of Krishna, you'll go to Krishna. Now, how can you think of Krishna at the end of your life? That means throughout your entire life, you have to practice thinking about Krishna while you're doing whatever you're doing. While you're doing whatever you're doing your studies, you want to keep Krishna in your mind. You want to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Right? So that is the second E. Okay. Now, the third is A. Right? A stands for attaining Krishna. Okay. A stands for attaining Krishna. So if you see further in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna actually says how we can actually very easily attain Krishna, right? So we'll see text number 15. Text number 15, Krishna says, yeah, okay, text number 14. Ananya cheta satatam yoma smarati nityasa tasyaham sulabha partha nitya yuktasya yogina. Actually, in the 6th chapter, if you remember, what did Arjun tell to Krishna? Arjun told, oh Krishna, it is very difficult to control my mind. And then Krishna said, yes, the mind is very, very troublesome, very obstinate, very stubborn, right? And then Krishna says, no, but it's possible by constant practice and detachment. And then we see here in the 8th chapter, Krishna is saying, yes, the process becomes very easy. How? If you actually remember Krishna without deviation. That means you have to engage in Bhakti Yoga, right? So it clearly says engagement in devotional service. So if you do Bhakti Yoga all throughout your life, and in that way you remember Krishna, then Krishna becomes very easy to attain. Right? And then he also says, right? Okay. Also, okay, so in the section of attaining Krishna, what does it really mean to attain Krishna? Right? So Krishna points out in this word, in this 15th verse, Mam upetya punarjanma dukhalayam ashashvatam naptunanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gatim. What does he say? Dukhalayam ashashvatam. So in this verse, Krishna is actually telling this entire material world you see, right? There are so many miseries, so many problems, right? What all problems do we face? Sometimes we get sick, we have a headache, we have a stomach pain, right? Or sometimes it's very hot, It's very cold. You know. So we get so many problems. And Krishna is saying, actually, if you see the entire nature of this material world, is there are going to be problems. That is the nature of the world. You cannot escape problems. The problems will come to you. The only thing is how you actually approach the problems so that problems itself can help you come closer to Krishna. Right? So Dukhalayam Ashashvatam. He says material world means there are going to be problems, but we have to become stronger so we can actually face the problems. And by practicing Bhakti Yoga, we become stronger in our life. Right? But then Krishna is saying, okay, this entire material world, so many problems. But then he says, what does it mean to attain Krishna? He actually says, attaining Krishna means to go back to Krishna. And then he says, there is, beyond, if this material world, there are problems, beyond this entire material world, there is a spiritual world. You know? So attaining Krishna means going to the house of Krishna where Krishna actually resides, which is actually the spiritual world. As long as we are in the material world, we'll have a body, and as long as we have a material body, we'll go through this birth, death, old age, disease. This cycle will keep going on and on and on. And Krishna says, why are you suffering? Come back to me. My abode, spiritual sky, the spiritual world is actually that you can come to me, and then we can have nice pastimes with each other. We can play with each other, and we can have you can directly be with Krishna. Right? So Krishna is actually talking about the material world and then the spiritual world. So attaining Krishna means to go back to Krishna's abode. Right? So A stands for attaining Krishna, or A can stand for the abode of Krishna. Abode of Krishna means what? The house of Krishna. Right? So Krishna is telling directly in the 8th chapter that yes, Krishna is in the spiritual world, and if we live a life in such a way that we actually remember Krishna, then we can actually go back to Krishna's abode. Okay, so we have done D, E, A, right? Now, what is the last part? Another D, right? So the last part of D is the devotion. How devotion is the complete process. Right? So D, E, A, D. So last D is the devotion is the complete process. In the last verse of this chapter, someone may say, okay, there is devotion. You keep talking about Bhakti Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Bhakti Yoga again and again. What about the different Vedas? What about so many sacrifices? What about this yagya, that yagya? What about all these things? And Krishna concludes the 8th chapter by actually saying that Vedeshu, Yagyeshu, Tapasu, Chaiva. He actually says, whatever, if you do devotion, then all your sacrifices are fulfilled, are successful. All your austerities are successful. All the study of your Vedas is successful. Whatever pious activities you're doing, that is successful. Just by engaging in bhakti to Krishna, everything else, all other processes become successful. So hence, devotion is actually the complete answer to all the problems, and that's a way that at the end of the life we can go back to the abode of Krishna, or we can attain Krishna. Okay, so we'll quickly review 8th chapter. What did we discuss? We started off by saying that how people actually, they do not like to talk about death because they do not know what happens at the time of death. But once you have knowledge of this transition, then you can actually conquer that. Die before dying, right? And we actually made the point that death actually happens to what? The material body, not the spirit soul. So if we can live our life on the platform of the spirit soul, then we can actually overcome death. We can conquer death, right? And then Krishna actually is saying, whatever you think of at the time of death, that is what you will attain. So if you think of Krishna, you will go back to Krishna. But at the time of death, thinking of Krishna means throughout your life, you have to practice thinking of Krishna. So while you're doing your duty, O Arjuna, while you're fighting, while you're studying, while you're doing whatever duty, you try to think about Krishna. And how do you think about Krishna in this age of Kali Yuga? Who can say? Please unmute and say. Go ahead. Anyone?
Hare Krishna Mahamantra.
Yes, thank you. So in this age of Kali Yuga, we think about Krishna by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. So while we are doing our studies and everything, if we keep the chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, at least every day in the morning, we take time and we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So every day in the morning, if we take time, we chant the Maha Mantra, then throughout the day, we can actually be connected with Krishna. And in that way, we can actually be successful. We will attain Krishna, A standing for attaining Krishna or the abode of Krishna. And the final D is devotion. The devotion is a complete answer. If you actually do bhakti to Krishna, then all your yajnas are successful. All your austerities are successful. All your study of the Vedas are successful. Bhakti Yoga is the complete answer. Okay? And that is how chapter 8 actually ends. Okay, so we'll stop here. Are there any questions, any comments? Or you could also share one point in this entire class that you really liked. Who would like to share? You can put it in the chat. At least one point from this entire class that you like, please put it in the chat so that we all can revise chapter 7 and chapter 8. What was the acronym for chapter 7? Head and, okay, string example. Very nice. Okay. Head, okay. What else? Like one point in the class that you really liked? Okay, very nice. So you cannot say God is not there when you do not even know who God is. And hence, more than seeing, we have to first, what do we have to do? Hear about Krishna, right? Hear about Krishna. Right? Very nice. You should prepare for that, which is living. So by living a life in such a way that we are always living a spiritual life, right? Preparation for the final exams. To live our life, be conscious of who we really are. Very nice. Thank you. Right? And how can we come to the spiritual platform? How can we live a life very spiritually? We have to destroy certain enemies, right? We have to defeat certain enemies. And who are those enemies? Lust, anger, greed, enviousness, right? Pride, all those things. Miseries will come and go. Surrender yourself, and Krishna will make you strong and leverage Bhakti Yoga throughout your life. Very nice points. Constant thinking of Krishna, head and dead. So that's a nice way of remembering chapter 7 and 8. Head and dead. Right? Think about Isaac Newton using the model of the solar system to show how God created everything. Very nice. Acronym head, when Newton used his head to make someone believe that God really exists. Okay, very nice. All wonderful points. So happy to see all these points. Anything else? Any questions anyone has? Very nice. Thank you so much for all your active participation. It's so nice to see how you're so focused and so absorbed, and you're actually, filling the chat with such wonderful points. It's just so inspiring to see how you all are, have the love for studying Bhagavad Gita. Very nice. So wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much. So we'll end here. So, all right. The world has a lot of problems. How can you respond? Is that a question? How can you respond to a problem? We made the point, right? We have to strengthen ourselves. We have to become strong in this life. And we become strong by actually coming closer to Krishna. Okay. Right. Very nice points. Okay. So thank you so much. So tomorrow we will not have class. Next class will be Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Okay, on the same Zoom link. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare
Thank you all so much for joining. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Thank you for teaching the class.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Thank you, Jishnu, for joining and listening attentively. Krishna.
I have one question, Prabhu.
Yeah.
So, हम बस उसे back करें.
Okay. So Good.
So we were talking about how at the end of at the end of our life, whatever we think about, that's what we become, right, in the next life. So in this world, like especially during high school, there's so many people with these mental distresses and their mental health issues are very high. And then they like so sadly they retrieve to like suicide as an option, right, Prabhu? If and then like what if one person says like I'm thinking about Krishna when I'm going to die like that. What's really the problem with that? So what should we say then?
See, we have to see our entire life as a gift from Krishna, right? We got this gift from Krishna, and doing that sinful, the most sinful activity of giving up our life is actually rejecting that gift, because that's also a gift from Krishna. So we have to live our life in such a way that, yes, problems will come, but, like ending our life, immaturely is not the solution, because when you do sinful activities, then what happens? Next life, you'll get some other sinful birth. You'll have more problems in your next life because you're committing sinful activities in this life. So the way to actually help them is actually, because why does mental stress and all these problems actually occur? Because there are 2 points here. One is lack of knowledge, right? They actually think that this world, this problem right now will never end, right? This problem will never end. This is my entire life. But through the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, we know that this entire life is just one chapter in the entire book, right? And as time passes, the problem will go and you'll go beyond that. So life is much bigger picture. So one is the lack of knowledge. So one way you can help is to give them this knowledge. The knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is so practical. It is applicable to everyone, is to actually give this knowledge, right? And the second way one can actually help them is, to actually help them through some meditation techniques, like, especially the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So, like, as soon as they chant, they seriously take up the process of chanting, they will feel that, yes, my consciousness is actually getting better. I am finding more happiness in my life. The Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the solution. Right? So, that's the second point. And the third point I would say is, in this age of Kali Yuga, it is an age of impersonalism, right? So people are very impersonal and without a proper relationship. So third solution is you actually become friends with them. And as soon as you become a friend where you are able to hear what is their problems, you have an open ear to them, you're willing to give time, give energy to help them, that itself will show that, yes, that relationship is there, and they'll feel that, yes, someone is there who cares of me, who's giving me knowledge, who's giving me guidance, who is there for me, and that is a big help. Mhm. And if it's a very extreme case where someone is seriously considering, doing something, then you should always report to, some other, there are so many like agencies who actually are expert at dealing with all these things. So then you can report to them also. From our side, we try to do the best we can, but because the mind is so strong, sometimes we will have to, connect them with some psychiatrists or, some agencies which actually deal with such serious problems and so on. So we do our best we can, and depending on the intensity of the problem, then we may have to connect them to someone who is more expert at dealing it from more an immediate or material perspective. Okay, and we always have a spiritual solution to give. Okay, so thank you so much. So we'll end here. Hare Krishna.